Good afternoon and welcome to the Library of Congress, introducing the Veterans History Project. I'm Cheryl Letterly. I'm an educational resources specialist here at the Library of Congress, and I'd like to introduce the rest of our speakers today. We're very excited to bring you both the expert voice from the library and the expert voice from the field. We have, in addition to me, Monica Mohindra from the Veterans History Project will give an overview of that program, their goals and the resources, as well as how people can participate. And then we'll hear from three teachers who have used Veterans History Project materials in their classroom settings. We're very excited. We'll welcome Bill Numa, who's an elementary teacher from Homer, Alaska. We'll welcome then Peggy King, who's a library media specialist working in Peoria, Illinois, and then Nicholas Stange, a high school teacher from Machesney Park, Illinois, will talk about how he has participated in these materials. There's plenty of space for questions and answers, so we'll be receiving those along as well. So Bill, take it away.
Hello, I'm Bill Numa. I teach 5th grade in Homer, Alaska, and I came to the Veterans Project trying to find a meaningful way to engage my 5th graders with Veterans Day. So if you could pull up my slideshow, please. The question that was driving me was, how do I build a schema for veterans, for kids who do not have that notion of what a veteran is? This is a rural community that does not have a military presence. The veterans community in our town is very, very small. They're represented by in a parade of maybe 6-10 people. So it was important for me to encounter this question: what is a veteran? I started off with just asking my kids, what do you know? And it ranged from everything to someone who's experienced to someone who takes care of larger animals. So I knew that I had plenty of work to do. I spent a number of days on the Veteran History Project looking for materials that I thought would resonate emotionally with kids, would build an understanding through spending time with real veterans. So the next slide, please. In my reading, I came across the collection of a World War II veteran by the name of T.A. Sugarman, and I was really enchanted with his story. He wrote a number of letters, a long list of correspondence that he donated to the Veterans History Project, and the one that was profiled on the splash page of the Veterans History Project just grabbed me emotionally. And what was really intriguing about it was that the envelope was there. And I don't know if the envelope is up. Is it up?
Yeah.
Okay. My kids spend about 25 minutes going through a document reading of this envelope. Kids don't have a lot of experience with envelopes. Just deciphering an address is a lesson that needs 10 minutes in it. There's also a lot of other key information in this envelope. If we spend a lot of time with it, the kids notice that the stamp is upside down. If we spend more time with it, we notice that there is a military censor seal on that. And so through a shared inquiry, the kids have more and more questions, which they document on their document response sheets. After about 30 or 40 minutes, the kids are ready to engage the text of the letter. And if you can throw that up. It's a letter that's written by many, many servicemen. It's a letter to a beloved. It's written to his wife. And in the course of reading it, I get choked up. It's a very normal letter. It's a letter I could imagine my grandfather reading or writing to his wife. It's probably a letter that many servicemen have written back home. And it's carefully guarded. it's gone through censors, and the person who wrote it knew how to write in such a way, both to get the letter through censors and also to convey confidence and undying love. There's also a strong sense that the person is facing their mortality. They know they might die, but they don't want their loved ones back home to worry about that. And so at the end of reading this letter, we talk again about what a veteran is. And the kids inevitably ask, did he die? And we pause for a moment to consider, does it really matter if he died or not? This veteran went into the war knowing that death is a real possibility. So the important part is recognizing that attitude of service and trying to give a sense of purpose to that service. And through this one brief letter, the kids walk away with an individual who has articulated their service to a loved one. Could I have the next slide, please? We spent quite a bit of time deconstructing the letter and the envelope, as I said, and then I partly answer that question for the kids. I say, these are some drawings drawn by T.A. Sugarman. And what we see in some of his drawings are some remarkable pencil drawings drawn during the landing on Normandy during D-Day. In other materials on the Veterans History Project, there are interviews with T.A. Sugarman. And then they realize, oh, he lived. But the interview that I've highlighted on the link in the PowerPoint, which people will be able to access, is him talking about the drawings that are provided in my slideshow. He talks about coming across the channel about 10 days after the D-Day invasion and going back out to rescue some people that had hit a landmine. And the experience of being in on that rough water and seeing sailors who had been thrown out of their ship was very, very disturbing to him. And art was the way that he processed his strong emotions. So again, we do another deconstruction of the art. We analyze everything that we see in it, and at the end, I ask the kids again, what is a veteran? And I think if we can forward to the last slide, what I've provided is a couple of blog entries of which my kids responded to that question, what is a veteran? And what we'll see is the kids had gone from a very ill-defined notion of what a veteran is to a very strong sense of the purpose and the sense of service and commitment to their country. And that is my presentation, and we'll pass it back to you.
Bill, thank you so much for that powerful Bill, thank you so much for that powerful testimony about how these materials can be used to bring history to life for your elementary students. What I'd like to do next is introduce Monica Mohindra of the Veterans History Project. Monica is going to give a highlight of more resources in addition to the ones that Bill connected with his students. Monica will also talk about how your students can participate if you have older students. Monica, at your convenience.
Hi, can I be heard? I'm going to assume yes. Great. First, I want to say, Bill, thank you so much. I actually got choked up when you talked about whether or not Tracy was alive, because actually he was alive until very recently, and I had the distinct privilege of getting to meet him. And he was a fantastic, almost Forrest Gump type character. So I would encourage you and your students, particularly as they matriculate out of your system, to look at the other collections here at the library pertaining to Tracy Sugarman. He has a wonderful webcast that he did around his work with civil rights. I'll just leave it at that. It's a great teaser. And if you'd like, we can communicate about that offline. But he was a phenomenal person and human being. So thank you for that amazing work you're doing with that collection. It was great information for me. So the Veterans History Project, just to do a brief overview, was founded through unanimous legislation by Congress and signed into law in October of 2000. And at that time, the goal was to collect the first-person perspectives, originally the Veterans Oral History Project, importantly they dropped the oral part, to collect the first-person perspectives of veterans from World War I through now, the conflicts, the recent ones in Iraq and Afghanistan. At the time, in October of 2000, the goal was really to get those World War II veterans before, truthfully, it's too late. And unfortunately, that's the language that's been used since October of 2000. We try to be a little more sensitive with the veterans themselves. And so for educators, that offers a couple of opportunities. One is the opportunity to actually work with students 10th grade and above to not only, I'll get to the secondary or equal benefit, I don't mean to put them in a hierarchical scale, but you have the opportunity to create with your students a primary resource. So you talk about it, and then they get to create one that goes into the Library of Congress for posterity. It looks fantastic on college applications, we are told. So I want to really draw attention to that. And then, as Bill has done, we then have this authentic archive ready for students with the help of educators, with the help of the fine folks, my colleagues in OSI, to drill down to age-appropriate collections that are this huge resource. We have over 90,000 individual collections. They grow, this archive grows at a rate of between 150 to 200 collections per week. That means that they are donated, voluntarily submitted by the veterans and the people who interview them and help to gather their materials to the Library of Congress. We do not have, whenever we do these talks, what happens is people hear veteran, project, collect first-person material, and they start thinking to themselves, oh, the library will send somebody to interview Aunt Myrtle. She was a whack. This story is very important. Yes, this story is very important. It's your job to get it. It's your student's job to get Aunt Myrtle's story. We do not have a staff. That is not how the project was designed. It was, in fact, designed to get individuals to engage in those conversations, in that collection of materials with the veterans in their lives and in their communities. Our staff is very teeny and can't handle going out to reach everybody's Aunt Myrtle. So I keep saying materials, and the other thing I want to draw your attention to is the notion of original materials. I'm mindful of the time, so if you could actually go ahead and pull up my slides. I'd like my first slide. What I'd like to do is draw your attention to our website, if that's possible. The homepage of our website enables, there we go, one more, there we are, enables, it's really, a splash page is a good term for it, an introductory page. I just want a chance for you all to see it. Great, thank you. The items that I want to draw your attention to are the navigation bars on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and that beautiful picture in the middle. In the middle is our current Experiencing War feature, which is thematically grouped collections that are fully digitized. Remember, I said we have 90,000 individual collections and growing. The digitized collections, great numbers of them are presented in these Experiencing War features, which change about quarterly. So that's what you'll find in the middle, and that does change. Every time you visit the website, you may notice that. And on the left and the right are great little navigation bars for getting around. If I could go to the next slide, please. So this is our slide particularly for how to participate, and this one and the next one are designed to help you and your students navigate for student and education purposes. What I want to impress upon you is that the Library of Congress must have the originals. So when you and your students participate, it's important for us to have as original as possible. I know with recording media that's changing all the time, but as original as possible recording media for that first-person interview, 30 minutes or longer. But we also are interested in those first-person experiences as they're presented through other forms of documentation, two-dimensional, such as photographs, memoirs, diaries, letters, as Mr. Numa explained. Those must be original, and that can be difficult, especially when you're having your students work with veterans who are not family members. It's important to understand that we preserve these under the standards of preservation of the Library of Congress. It does not make sense for tax dollars to be spent to preserve photocopies or even good digital copies, so they must be originals. And I want to give you a brief story for why. If I could have the next slide, please. So this is a collection that I really love. It's the Albert John Carpenter collection. It is of World War I, and I mention it because we're finding an increase in World War I collections, 10 photographs or letters original sent to us, 20 or more diary pages, memoir pages, journal pages, etc. The reason that's happening is because people are going through their closets, their attics, their garages, a few generations removed now, and in some cases are not entirely clear on how it is they're related to the veterans whose experience is documented in these wonderful first-person ways. So we're receiving them in the mail, which is fantastic. But the reason I want to point to this particular collection is because Shirley Carpenter, Mr. Albert John Carpenter's daughter-in-law, sent us this collection and then sent us a thank you note when it was digitized and a correction to a photo caption that we had. So we engaged in a little bit of a dialogue with her. Her thank you note was not as we had suspected for digitizing it and having it presented to educators such as yourself and people all across the world. It was, in fact, because without the project, that collection would have been lost. The original, which she sent to us, was living in a box in a closet, about yay big, that included the family Bible and other important documents. And that hall closet, after she sent us the materials, was completely submerged in flooding from Hurricane Rita. So had she not sent it to us, it wouldn't be available for anybody to view or to further understanding for anybody's experience. So that's a really great example of why it is we need the originals. It's our business to house and preserve these things. We haven't had a fire in a couple hundred years. So we hope to be able to have these available for posterity. They're not just digitized, they're served literally every week in the American Folklife Center reading room to researchers looking up things you can't even possibly imagine, which I also think is a great thing to share with your students, that not only are they researching with these fantastic researchers amongst these same rich collections, their work may be used by researchers for things like incidences of malaria in Asia during World War II, American GIs playing mahjong in the Pacific Theater, nurses' perspectives on desegregation in the Korean War. Ken Burns and Florentine Films have been using our collections in preparation for upcoming films. A young adult fiction writer has used our collections, nonfiction, everything you can imagine it being used for and things you can't, the collection is used for. And those students' work, those veterans' contributions are being used in that way. So I want to make sure that you know about that. I definitely want to leave time to answer questions and for these fantastic educators to share the wonderful ways in which they're working with the project. So one thing I'll say here before I pass the baton is please know, if you're participating with your students, your family members in your personal life, collections must come in via commercial carrier. They may not come in via U.S. Postal Service, and that's because everything that is sent to the Capitol Hill campus goes through a screening process. commercial carrier, USPS. The difference is the USPS screening process literally melts the materials, whereas the commercial carrier screening process does not. It does not have to be sent expedited. In fact, please don't. It doesn't actually get here that much faster, but it must come in commercial carrier or hand delivery. We love having groups come and deliver collections. It's a fantastic activity with students, with veterans, and they've come from as far away, not, Bill, as far away as Alaska, but they've come from as far away as California and Utah, Florida, Maine. So we're always happy to have groups do that, and just let us know about that. I know that my information will be shared, but if you want to write it down now, my email address is mm as in Mary, OHI @loc.gov. And I want to pass the baton and leave time for questions. So thank you.
Monica, thank you so much for letting us see a little bit about the rich and exciting work that you do. Monica has mentioned a couple of times leaving time for questions, and that's certainly a goal we all share. Just a highlight of what's to come. Next up, we'll hear from Peggy King, who will talk about how she connects primary sources, ROTC, and the Veterans History Project. And then we'll hear from Nick Stange. Meanwhile, please keep your questions coming. If you have a question, just type it into the box. We don't guarantee, we'll guarantee to get answers as quickly as makes sense in the program. It might be immediately and it might be at the end, but we love to hear the questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Peggy King to talk about the work that you've done with your high school and middle school students.
Hello, I'm Peggy King. I teach at Manual Academy in Peoria, Illinois. And 2 years ago, Susie McCraith and I took a class through Quincy University that kind of showed how to go through the whole oral history project with veterans. And what we did was just mimic with our students what we did in our class. This was a 6-month project. We worked with our junior ROTC, the senior battalion staff, and we ended up interviewing, we had 20 students, and we ended up interviewing 8 veterans. The majority of the veterans were World War II veterans, and then we had a couple Korean War and a few Vietnam veterans, I believe. We paired the students up in groups of 3 or 4, and what we started off with was just a basic introduction of the Library of Congress, where it was located, the miles and miles of shelving, and the different collections that they had. And our students didn't understand, but we had a slideshow that was actually given to us from our instructor at Quincy University that just kind of gave us basic information about the Library of Congress. And our students didn't realize that you just couldn't walk in and check out a book. So that was kind of an introduction to the students too. We started at the beginning of September introducing the project, and we talked about the difference between a primary and a secondary source. And we talked about looking at primary sources, and it actually just tells the story of somebody's life. So we started off with doing an activity with the collection of Lincoln's pockets. And we put a picture of all of the items that were in Lincoln's pockets the night that he was assassinated, and we talked about we had to try to figure out what everything was. And then we had to figure out why he had these in his pocket. And some of the kids, and me included, didn't know what some of the items were. So after we talked about that, we tried to figure out Lincoln's story. Why did he have 2 pairs of glasses in his pocket, or why did he have a Confederate bill in his pocket? And the next class session, we pulled a video from the historian from the Library of Congress off of the History Channel, and that explained a little bit about what was found in Lincoln's pockets. And how we brought the veterans into play was we could actually tell the story of some of these veterans by some of their memorabilia or their primary sources, their letters or their medals or whatever they had that they could share with the students. In the background of all of this, as we were talking to all the kids about all of this, we were in contact with the American Legion Post 2, and we kind of rustled up 8 veterans who agreed to come in and talk to our students, our junior ROT students. We talked to our kids about interviewing skills, being polite. The biggest thing that they were, the most nervous thing that they experienced was, my gosh, some of these people could be 80 years old and I'm 16. And it was just kind of like, I'm nervous to talk to somebody that old, and we needed to tell them they're probably nervous to talk to somebody as young as you are. So that was kind of an interesting thing. We talked about different careers that can build from this. We had a person from the Peoria Journal-Star come in, that's our local newspaper, and talk to our students about interviewing skills, being polite and mannerly, how you dress. We made sure that all of our kids were all in uniform. He was also a videographer, so when we actually shot the video, he was giving them some pointers and tips, like the lighting in the background, what kind of stuff behind you is going on that's going to deter actually focusing in on the veteran. We talked about camera angles and different things like that. In November, we have a huge Veterans Day celebration where we have veterans come in, and our ROTC do like different drills and things. So we decided that afternoon we would have the veterans that were in the audience. We'd invite the veterans to the show or the assembly, and this is when the interviewing actually took place. We've practiced. We made sure that the kids knew how to, shake hands. Made sure we thanked the veterans for their service at the end. The students actually were in offices. No other adult other than the veteran. They set up the cameras. They did all of the talking. And one of the requirements, as you said, was you needed a 30-minute interview for it to actually be accepted or whatever into the Library of Congress. And that made us a little nervous about that. But in the end, many of the interviews went well into over an hour, which was amazing. We kept going, now what's going on in there? We wanted, we didn't want to interrupt, but as they came out of the rooms after talking to the veterans, it was just amazing. Not only the respect that was built, but kind of a friendship that was built between somebody of an older age and our younger kids. If the veterans were not able, for health reasons, to get to school for the interviews, we went to their homes. And we went to three or four veterans invited us into their homes. And a lot of them had their medals out, their letters that they wrote to their wives, maps. So it all kind of gave the kids something to talk about. I probably should back up. Before we did the interviewing, we had kind of a question and answer sheet for our veterans that they filled out, so the kids were able to know in advance what battles or campaigns the veterans served in, what rank of the Army or military they were in, and they did research about that. We used the Library of Congress webpage to try to find pictures from different battles that our veterans served in, or different letters, different maps. So when the students went in actually to interview or talk to the veterans, it was more of a conversation other than just reading questions. One thing that our students were very, very nervous about also was the videotaping. So while Ms. McCraith and I took the class in the summer, we actually interviewed a veteran, and we had to be videotaped. So we showed our kids our video, and we asked them to critique our video. And they were very honest, and we knew it wasn't a very good one because there were different things, like there was noise in the background, and we just did quick. It had to be quick because it was a one-day thing. But our kids recognized all of that, and that made them feel so much more comfortable when they saw that the adults that they trust can make mistakes also. So in the end, they did the interviews in March and December, and then after the winter break, January, February, March, they went through the video editing process. And it took about 3 months because we were just seeing our kids twice a week for an hour, about 40 minutes each. I worked with Susie McCraith, who is one of our special ed teachers, Jeff Kepler, who is our technology interventionist, and myself, and Colonel Hallstrom, who is the colonel of the junior ROTC classes. along with people from the community, a reporter from the Journal Star and the American Legion Post too. In the end, when everything was done, we made sure that each veteran got a copy of their video that was recorded, and we had our English department come in to make sure that we sent out thank you letters to all the veterans. And they helped us with all of that, with the proofing and getting everything set up correctly. So that, in a nutshell, was kind of our project. It lasted about 6 months. It was an unbelievable experience for not only our veterans, but also our students, too.
Peggy, thank you so much for sharing how your students developed so many skills through participating with the Veterans History Project. We appreciate the insights you've passed along. Next up, I'd like to introduce to you Nicholas Stange. He's going to talk about the work he has done collecting interviews through the Harlem 122 Vet Project. Thanks, Nicholas.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by saying I'm just one of 3 sponsors for the program. I work with Kira Noonan, who's the organization, and the nice one the students would tell you. Dave Johnson, who's the brains, and I'm the bearded angry one. So I apologize for being the one on camera. We're very similar to kind of what Peggy is talking about. You know, a lot of her stories she was sharing brought back memories of us going through the process. We've been doing this for about 5 years here at Harlem, and we've kind of named it the Harlem Veteran Project. It is a class that's all year long. So we have our students from the beginning of the year all the way to the end of the year. And we have grown to 40 students. So me and Dave actually teach 2 sections of it. So we've grown from 8 students about 4 years ago to 40 now, just because the kids really want to take the class. Basically, I don't know if the slides are shown or not, but the slides, we started a long time ago. We work in partnership with the Illinois Veteran and Community Classroom Project. They kind of got us going with a grant about 5-6 years ago, and Vicki DeWitt down there, she's just great, and her staff, and they really helped guide us along during this whole process. Basically what we do is our goal is to preserve as many veteran stories as we possibly can. During the 5 years that we've been doing this, we've captured over 150 interviews, and we've preserved those. So we're the ones going out there and talking to Aunt Myrtle in our area, and Uncle Bill, and Grandpa George. And the veterans want to talk, is what I found out. I remember putting the first press release out there a few years ago, and for about 2 weeks, I was making phone calls home to veterans for 2 hours after school. A lot of them were long, a lot of them were loud, but they were all highly entertaining, and they do want to share their stories. Most of our interviews have been World War II veterans, just because like Monica was saying earlier, you know, their age. It's important to get as many of them preserved. This year, though, we started interviewing Vietnam veterans as well as Korean veterans. So it's really neat to see the difference in the 3 different types of interviews that we're starting to see. So we put the press release out there. Our students as well become some of our best recruiters. They realize Grandma and Grandpa has a story that they want to capture, which is just neat in itself, because a lot of times, you know, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids aren't thinking about how important Grandma or Grandpa's life is, because they're worried about their own lives. But we've seen that change in our class. When we get contact, we send out the Library of Congress bio form. We ask them to fill that out, and just like Peggy was talking about, when we get that back, we have our students do research, so they can have better prepared questions. And both sides are nervous. You know, you have gentlemen and ladies coming in sharing memories that they've never shared with anybody before, and then you got 16, 17-year-old kids who want to do it right and make sure they're getting a story. So there's a lot of nervous energy on those days when you're interviewing the vets. And we always tell the students it's important to build up that trust with the veteran. You know, a lot of the times there's not a lot of trust for the younger generation. So they got to build up that trust. So we talk a lot about 2-part questions. One part, hey, I know what I'm talking about, and then the question. For example, hey, I saw in your sheet here you were born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. Could you please tell me what it was like growing up then? Because it shows them, hey, they've done some research, they read my bio form, and that's important to build up that trust. One of the problems that we have is we interview so many people. We actually did 80 interviews one school year. We actually work with Rock Valley College in the area, and we actually did 16 in one day. Because we're getting so many videos, we're just not able to capture all those stories that year. Because the big part of what the class does is they take the primary source, which is the interview, and they create a 30-minute documentary from that. And in that documentary, they'll add in other primary sources such as letters, diary entries, pictures, maps, as well as writing their own voiceovers. So it becomes quite a complex process. So we need to get the students invested. So the first day of school, or the first week of school, they get assigned a vet. And that happens through kind of a lottery system. We give them a description of many vets, and then they will pick a vet. This is what we found to be the best way to do it. Once they get their vet, because they most likely weren't at the interview, we just get them to watch and watch and watch it. We're trying to build up student investment at this point. So we're just trying to get them to watch it once. Just in general, listen to the stories. Another time, start taking notes, and then we'll have them actually do the Library of Congress log sheet at this point. So they're just getting comfortable with their story. And then another thing that we started doing a couple years ago was actually meeting our vets. So we actually organized a breakfast here at the Camp Grant restaurant, which was an old World War II camp, and there's a lot of memorabilia in there. So then they finally get to meet this vet. And this tends to be a very great morning. You know, these kids for about 3 months have been staring at this face for 50 minutes, and then they finally get to meet them at breakfast. It's got to be a surreal moment for them. But it's just a really neat experience. The vets come in, they bring pictures, and talk to them. So it really is a good event. And then we encourage them to keep in contact. Sorry, school's getting out. I don't know if the bell is picking up. So we encourage them to stay in contact with them throughout the whole process, and most of them are able to do that. And they really build up this relationship, and that's what makes the class so magical, is this bond that's connected between this 95-year-old gentleman and this 16, 17-year-old, you know, a young adult, young man, young woman in the class. And, you know, we still have kids 2 years from now that hang out with their vet, you know, around Christmas time, and they go visit them at the house. That's what makes it magical. For the first, then we get to the editing process, which I believe I have a slide that kind of breaks down our steps there. The editing's big. It's tough to do. We have to teach the editing program, which we do with a project. Just that project alone shows you the power of this class. It's actually a project where we take a 5-minute clip from Charles Nelson's story, and it's a clip talking about how he missed his wife and young daughter when he was overseas in Europe. And the cool thing that I was able to tell his family, one of the unfortunate things is Charles Nelson passed away. But I was able to go to the visitation, let his daughter know that there's been 40 kids this school year heard the story, 80 kids now after this year, 120 after this year. I mean, that's the power of collecting these stories. We teach them the program with that clip. They learn how to organize with an editing program. Then we have them organize their clips, and then we have them storyboard within the program itself. That's the phase we're at right now in the school year. So then me and Mr. Johnson are watching all their documentaries with them in their storyboard. We're watching their storyboards with them and giving them feedback. Now they're working on writing these big voiceovers. You know, if it's a paratrooper, they're given, you know, maybe a 2-3 minute voiceover on what the paratrooper's importance was during World War II. So they're diving in and they're doing extensive research at this process. Eventually, they'll put all that together and they'll re-storyboard on paper, and then they'll make a rough cut, and then we'll watch all this together, and they edit all this down to about a 30-45 minute documentary. We've completed 80 of those documentaries so far. We'll have 40 more this year. So that'll put us up at 120. And those actually all get posted online at the Illinois Veteran and Community Classroom Project. Then, that's just the first 3 quarters of the year. The 4th quarter, we start setting up for what we call the gala. And this is a chance for the students to showcase their work and to honor the veterans and civilians that have come in and shared their stories. Because we have 40 vets in the program, or 40 students, we can't show them all. So we put them in groups about 5 to 6. And then in this group, they need to create a 5-minute mini documentary, kind of a compilation video that takes some common thread between all of them. And we pretty much lock the room and tell them they can't come out till they have it figured out. And then the only guidance we give them is, nope, go back in, or yes, you're good to start working on it. Then what they do is we take these 5-minute clips and we give about a 2-3 hour presentation at the high school. We invite out all the veterans and all the students' parents to take part in it. And the students showcase their work. Each group gives a speech, and then that's when they actually hand off their documentary to their veteran. So it's really become a great evening for us to watch that. And just seeing that bond, I mean, if you click over on a couple slides, you'll see a bunch of pictures on the slideshow. And then, like, we have vets who come dressed up in their uniforms. You know, it's just amazing seeing them. I mean, they're like rock stars to our class. You know, Iris Spencer, little Iris Spencer coming in, you see her in person, and you just, even as a teacher, I've watched these stories probably 3 or 4 times. It's like seeing celebrities come in. And the kids, it means so much for the kids. It really does. They put so much work into it, and they care so much. And then kind of the 5th thing that our project's about is community outreach. Some of the community outreach we need to do because we get very little funding from our district. So we've all done it through grants students have written or fundraising, and to help build up civic responsibility. So we do a pasta fundraiser dinner every year. We've had kids volunteer for the Vets Roll organization, which is in Beloit, Wisconsin, which takes World War II veterans out to see their memorials. And then we do the gala, of course, and we do some other different projects throughout the school year. To me, the best thing is that bond that's created between the students and the veterans. It's truly magical to see how much they care. You know, I think back to the gala last year. A young lady, we found out the day of that her veteran passed away. And to tell her was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, that he couldn't attend it. And seeing her just break down in, you know, tears and crying there like it was a family member who passed away. But now she's graduated, and the gentleman's widow will then come to her place at work and will just wait for her to get off, and then they will go and hang out. And it's because of this project that we have stories like that. You know, I'm sure Peggy can tell you as well as others. I mean, it's worth every minute and time to see just the bond that's created. And on top of that, I mean, the veterans and civilians, when you do something like this, would become the teachers. They give the details that I can't give. I always kind of view, when I'm teaching, I'm just giving them like a foggy picture. They're the ones that clear the fog for the students. And it really is just a neat project. I just encourage anybody to get out there and preserve these stories. So.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for sharing the power of collecting the items. So we've heard about the power of using the items, the power of collecting the items. I'd like to transition now to showing you some of the teacher-built resources that Monica mentioned. And I'd like to show you around those just a little bit from the library teacher's homepage. The first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that we do have a blog. In fact, if anybody would like to continue this conversation, either folks participating right now or folks who come and look at this later and think, gosh, I wish I had been able to ask whatever question or offer this insight. On the blog a couple of days ago, we did highlight this Hangout, and there's room for comments. So that's one way to continue the conversation. We've gotten a couple of questions coming in from the audience, so I'm going to go through my part and then go ahead and try to tell you how to find the answers to that or open it up to my colleagues. So the next thing, in addition to the blog, that I'd like you to see is that we've built a number of classroom materials, and we draw from the library's collections. Today what I'd like to focus on are the classroom materials built from the Veterans History Project, and I'd like to draw your attention to primary source sets. We have primary source sets on a fair number of curricular topics that might be of interest to teachers. We try to cover the K-12 spectrum. And 2 of our primary source sets are specifically drawn from the Veterans History Project. And it was powerful to work with the experts on Monica's staff over at VHP and to select what would be appropriate for K-12 teachers. One of them is Veterans Stories, the Veterans History Project, and as you can see, we have items from the collections themselves. We tried to get a broad swath of possibilities there, including interviews, images, letters, diaries. Like Bill, I love Tracy Sugarman's collection. They're just so powerful visual that you can use them with almost anybody, really, because they're visual. In addition, the primary source sets include analysis tools and teachers' guides to help you as teachers get into them. So, Bill, it warmed my heart to see that you talked about using the analysis tool with your students, because we put a lot of work into building that set of materials. Before we pause for answering questions, I'd like to point out that we've put in a couple of slides with links to some of the resources that people have mentioned. So the first slide has links to the Veterans History Project. And I'm going to pause here and ask one of the questions that I see on my screen, which is, teachers, have any of you worked with veterans from more recent conflicts?
The most recent that we've interviewed have been Vietnam veterans. So we have a teacher who comes in each year that was in Afghanistan as a combat med and shares his stories. But outside of that, Vietnam's as current as we've gotten.
Thank you.
Same with us. Vietnam was the most current.
Terrific. Thank you. The other question we have, I've shown you where to find the Teaching with the Library of Congress blog. Do any of you have blogs where folks in our viewing audience could access more of your stories?
I don't have a blog, but there is the Illinois Veteran Community and Classroom Project, and I think I put the link on there for my last slide, is where you can see the finished documentaries for not only Harlem High School, but the other 12 schools that participate in it.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Anybody else care to add in from their perspective possibilities?
I don't have one.
You don't have one. Terrific. And then the last slide I'd like to leave you with is the Library of Congress link to teacher resources. We've heard how primary sources can personalize history. Bill talked powerfully about what his teachers, what his students learned from reading the letters, from really getting to know these folks from a distant time as real people with real families, real fears of what they might encounter. If you're looking for additional stories in a ready-to-grab package, you might check out the primary source sets. You are, of course, welcome to poke around the Veterans History Project, which is the mother lode of those resources, if you have a little more time. Put up a link to the Teacher's Guides and Analysis tool. And the last link on the slide is to professional development. Peggy mentioned an activity she did looking at the contents of Lincoln's pockets. And that activity can be found in the professional development materials. So we are a few minutes from the top of the hour. If anybody has questions, we're happy to stay on and try to answer them if we possibly can. We'd like to thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, Monica. I'm not sure what Monica's gesturing something, so go ahead and chime in.
Sorry, I just wanted to take the opportunity to chime in before we close with two quick things I should have mentioned. One is that we also offer workshops for volunteer groups, 25 to 60 people. Lots of times educators, particularly in high school settings, don't need that, but that's something I want you to know about, to reach out to us about if you'd like to know more information about that. And then, of course, the other thing is our 15-minute video. I noticed no one here has mentioned that so far, and I forgot to mention it, but it is in the upper right-hand corner of our website, and it's just a brief video which does nothing like the wonderful 25-minute document reading exercises or some of the other things that have been mentioned here, but it does give just a brief glimpse into how to build rapport and some of these other techniques that these wonderful educators have mentioned. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, Monica, to you. And again, thanks to Bill and Nicholas and Peggy for taking time out of your busy day. You're either in the middle of a school day, and I know what that's like, or you're past the end of the school day, and we appreciate in any event that you've taken your time to join us and talk about your experiences. We'll post links to Nicholas's resource and make sure that we post a link to everything Monica's mentioned if it didn't get included on the slide. I kept that slide pretty high level.